For in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen, amen. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So I just say welcome to everyone who is here today. We appreciate you. Please let us know your name, where you're from, like if you're on the island, if you're in SVG, if you're in Nigeria, if you're in any leadership role or whatever, like let us know where you're from, your name in the comments, in the chat box rather. Please let's just quickly do that. Okay, please let us know your name. Okay, so we have Charlene from Dominica. We have SM from Dominica. Thank you, you're welcome. Songbi from Dominica, you're welcome. We have Toby currently in Dominica. We have Favor from Dominica. Okay, Brasilas. We have Silas Abiodun, CMDA Caribbean Student Representative from Dominica. Thank you. Please let us know where you're from. We have Okoyemi from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have Ifelua from Dominica. Thank you. We have Idon Gessit from Maryland. Thank you. Please let us know your name, where you're from, quickly. Okay, I think that's it. Any other person? We have Enoch Hadewara from Dominica. Okay, thank you so much to everyone. I appreciate you. Okay, so already among us, we have Dr. Paul. So I just want us to put our hands together for Dr. Paul in the chat box. Let's just clap for him. Let's just appreciate him for being here, for being on time, irrespective of his schedule. You know, let's just give him some applause. Let's appreciate God in his life. Let's thank God that he is here. It's a privilege to have him here. Really appreciate you, Doctor.
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay. Did you want me to get started?
Not yet, sir. Just a minute. Just a
Okay.
minute. I'm just trying to put some things together quickly.
Okay, very good.
Sorry, just a little technical difficulty there. So let's talk about Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul W. I don't know. I'm not sure if I pronounce it well, but please apologies. Dr. Paul W. HRUZ is an academic pediatric endocrinologist, hormone specialist, and tenured physician scientist with faculty appointments in both pediatrics and cellular biology and physiology at Washington University in St. Louis. He received his MD and PhD degrees from the Medical College of Wisconsin. He completed residency training in pediatrics at the University of Washington in Seattle and fellowship training in pediatric endocrinology at Washington University. Dr. Rose has clinical interest in a wide range of endocrine disorders with a special interest in diabetes mellitus. His research interests include intermediary carbohydrate metabolism, glucose transporter structure and function, and mechanism of insulin action. Dr. Rose also has over 20 years of clinical experience in caring for children with disorders of sexual development. He has received certification in healthcare ethics from the National Catholic Bioethics Center and is a regular contributor to his university's course on research ethics for graduate students. Dr. Rose also has assisted the Christian Medical and Dental Association in reviewing scientific evidence for the medical management of sex-discordant gender identity. He has authored over 60 peer-reviewed manuscripts, scientific reviews, and book chapters. Most importantly, together with his wife, Annie, he has raised his 5 children in St. Louis. Dr. Paul Rose will be speaking on navigating your way for a breakthrough and outstanding career in medical research today. Please, once again, let's present together for Dr. Rose. Let's appreciate him once again. You're welcome, Doctor. You can take over now.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and welcome to all of you. It's really is a privilege for me to have this opportunity to present to you, just some of the basic overview of establishing a career and really doing well in the medical research arena. It's certainly an area that I have spent most of my time throughout my professional career. And what I hope to do this evening is to share with you, what I've learned along the way. And I recognize that many of you are coming from different areas and different levels of training as well. So to provide that helpful encouragement and advice, and really so that you can thrive in this exciting world of research. And it goes without saying that with the amazing technical advances that have occurred just over the last few decades in the discovery of many new research tools have led to a tremendous number of new medical discoveries. And it's never been a better time, really, I would say, to establish a career in medical research or to be involved in research, however you work that out in your career with your patient care. Really, I think you have the potential, to literally transform the practice of medicine in the new millennium, far-reaching consequences. Our whole goal in medicine really is to alleviate suffering and to provide the best care to the patients we serve. And as we grow in our understanding, all of the deficiencies become all the more obvious, and all of the opportunities to do better in alleviating that suffering. And in whatever discipline that you're training in right now or hoping to engage in throughout your professional career. So my aim here today is really to provide you with a general roadmap for navigating this exciting but often complicated professional career path, that of the physician scientist. And I really bring to the conversation really several perspectives that I've learned over the years that I've been involved. And this includes my experience in running a basic science research laboratory over the past quarter century, but also, serving as a grant and manuscript reviewer and serving as a primary research mentor for the graduate students working in my laboratory, and probably a greater number of graduate students and residents on thesis committees and both formal PhD thesis committees and what we call scholastic oversight committees for people that are embarking on the later stage of their clinical training. And I also have a perspective really from reviewing a number of different applications to our graduate program, our residency program, and fellowship, and have served for many years as our fellowship program director. So I want to be able to share some of that, of what I learned. I would say at the outset, many of the things that I'm going to share with you are based upon the mistakes that I made or a lack of understanding when I was getting established my career. And I want really to give you the tools so that you can avoid those pitfalls, but also get engaged in research and thrive along the way. So because we have such a wide array of trainees, students that are joining in today, I want to just begin by outlining that there are a number of different pathways that you can embark upon to be able to establish yourself in medical research. My own career began by joining a formal medical scientist training program. When I engaged in that at the very beginning, these were relatively new programs. Now they're very standard in many of the major medical schools. And the path was, to spend my first 2 years delving into the basic science coursework of medical school, and then taking that initial 2 years experience and then taking a leave from a medical school to spend the next 3 years of my life working formally in the graduate program at my medical school, where I did research in the area of biochemistry. It was only after completing that thesis and defending that thesis that I entered the final 2 years of medical school for my clinical rotations. And again, that was a wonderful time of my life. It went past much faster than I would have expected. Looking back on it now, many of the anxieties and concerns that I had at that time really were not necessary. And if I had known ahead of time just how much fun this was going to be and the supports that are available for this career path, it would have made it much easier along that time. After finishing my MSDP training, really I was still only getting started in the career of research. And so I did as you heard in the introduction, I did a residency in pediatrics. And one of the challenges I had at that point is that I had been so enthralled in research and really that fire had been lit to be involved in scientific investigation, that I had a somewhat unrealistic expectation during that residency training that I was going to be able to continue with active research at that time. What I learned really is that for most people during residency, you have so many responsibilities in learning the clinical aspect of the practice of medicine that formal research is not possible, but many other ways that you can still remain engaged. In fact, I had the opportunity when I was at the University of Washington to have as a mentor a former Nobel laureate, and as we engaged in that research, many of my clinical responsibilities made it impossible to continue with that. It was only until only when I entered into my fellowship training at the later end. This was a clinical fellowship, but much of clinical fellowship training includes intensive opportunities for research. And that was where I really became involved in the area of diabetes that I spent most of my career studying. And that was really a special time in my development. And I'm going to share some of what I've learned along the way about the choices that I made, that some of my colleagues have made, and give you, really what the options are. But then after I finished that fellowship, I chose to stay at Washington University, the place where I finished my training, to assume a faculty position. And I would say that the training that one needs doesn't end when you complete the formal stages of your training in medical school or residency. In fact, it's a lifelong experience. During the early stages of my research, my independent research career as a faculty member, I continued to have several mentors that helped guide me in writing that first grant and in writing those first manuscripts and being connected to other scientists. And it was a gradual transition to more independence. And then very quickly, you'll find that you yourself will transition from being mentored to yourself being a mentor. And many of the residents in our program have had similar interest in medical research, and they have themselves served as mentors to the medical students that are behind them. And these conversations can happen at any time, even when one is on the wards, on call at night, or between lectures in fulfilling all of the medical responsibilities that you have in training. So really encourage that open dialogue and just investigation, and just really to be curious, I think is one piece of advice. But I could say that even though I went through this formal medical scientist training program or MSTP program, it's not the only way that one can enter into the academic arena and establish a career in medical research. Some trainees are exposed to research, and sometimes very intensive research during their undergraduate years or at various stages throughout their medical training. But many will have their very first experience in research really at the later stage, perhaps their subspecialty fellowship. And while pursuing a formal PhD degree has advantages, I had the privilege of being able to spend that time in graduate school. It's not an absolute necessity. It does provide a structured environment and an open space to be able to dig down and get some of the basic tools that one needs to be a successful researcher. But I would say that there are many other ways to be able to do that. In fact, I had a clinical fellow who entered my laboratory many years ago with absolutely zero prior research training. And she's now serving as the vice chancellor for research at a small medical school in California. She frequently reminds me of just how her passion for medical research was kindled when she was surrounded by the small network of absolutely brilliant, energetic, and dedicated and optimistic colleagues. And that included the graduate students in my laboratory and within the Department of Pediatrics and other postdoctoral fellows that she interacted with. So I think environment is really key, and you want to surround yourself with others that share that same passion for research that can help you along the way and inspire you, to fulfilling your greatest potential. When one of the first questions that I often get asked for students that are considering, just at the early stages of considering embarking in medical research, is to make a specific decision about where they're going to train, who their mentor is going to be, and what research project that they want to join in on, and particularly when they're faced with multiple different opportunities. And that's really a privilege to be able in that setting to have many choices, but it can often be daunting for trainees. And so therefore, I want to be able to highlight some of the ways that you can navigate that. And what I would suggest are some important considerations. The first is to remember that when you're in that training phase, whether it's a postdoctoral fellowship or it's a more formal training, that what you're aiming to do is to develop the basic skills of research and being able to be a critical thinker, being able to read papers with an eye to understanding where the limitations and weaknesses are, being able to develop a good hypothesis, and then also the technical skills that are necessary in whatever field that you're immersed in. And many people fear that committing themselves in this early stage of training will lock them into a very narrow focus of a discipline, and really that's unfounded. I think in that stage of training, there are many options, and it's only when you get later in training that you really need to be mapping out a course of where you're going to get that first independent grant and how you're going to be able to establish your reputation in a particular field. So I would really emphasize looking for the right fit, the right mentor, the right environment, and that's very unique for any one individual. And I'll talk a little bit about some guidelines of how that may vary from one person to another. I think this provides some necessary freedom to be able to explore and to be able to find that where your particular strengths and needs are, and what are the resources that can allow you to excel in that area. And many times there are competing factors. And so you need to for yourself, be able to prioritize which are the most important factors for you. And that will differ from one person to the next. For me, I was looking for, first and foremost, the very best mentor that I could have for my graduate training. And then when I got to my postdoctoral training, I was looking more intensely at the actual research project. So again, this will vary depending on whether you're still in medical school and residency or thinking about or moving on to your fellowship training. And it even applies to your first faculty appointment and the decisions that you made. Regarding the actual environment, the actual school, you do need to consider, both size and the reputation of the program. You also, it's important to know the number and the availability of prospective mentors. And the best advice I could give is if you're fortunate enough to be in an environment where there are several potential mentors that you have to choose from, rather than really needing to focus on just what is in front of you. You want to look at the history of the prior trainees and what their success has been after training. Where are they located? What are they doing? And if at all possible, be able to contact them and get their own personal experience. You'll learn a lot of information when you do that. And then there are considerations of personal needs, whether you have a spouse or a significant other, family members that you need to care for, and even the location that you're working in. Some will choose to stay very close to home of where they were raised and where they went to medical school. Others have the opportunity and desire to embark and travel to the United States or to Europe or to other areas. So again, that's going to be very important. I think as you're choosing an environment, a school or a research institution, you also have to recognize, that at least in our current culture, there's been really dramatic shifts that have occurred in the last decade, and other factors that you are going to have to navigate. So at least have an awareness of how your religious beliefs and political views may play out in your environment. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to seek out somebody that shares your worldview, but at least that they will allow you to be able to live your life according to those values. And not all programs are equal in that regard. And I think it's fair to say that should be at least considered. Now from that just general question of where, what institution and that you're looking to go, and many of you have already made that choice of where you're training right now. I want to shift now to talking a little bit about mentorship and selecting your mentor, and recognize that this is going to be a key step in being successful in establishing your research. Mentors have varying personalities and styles of mentorship. There are some mentors who are very hands-on. They're present daily within the conduct of research, whether it's clinical research or within the laboratory. And they're very valuable because they can provide a considerable amount of oversight and guidance. And especially if you're more tentative in embarking and have a lot of need for learning about technical skills and the early design of your experiments. On the negative side of that, that you may find a mentor that is too overbearing or too present, that may limit your independence, your ability to think creatively. Because part of the learning process, we all do this, is we make mistakes. And many times we can learn from those mistakes, and we want to be able to make those mistakes. And I look at any parent that is raising a child. There are boundaries of what you let them do, but you let them fail so that they can learn from their mistakes and be better at that. On the other side of the spectrum are mentors that are more laissez-faire, meaning that you may not even see them more than a couple of times a year, or they're not very involved in the day-to-day running of the laboratory. And this environment really can be an advantage for some people. It provides a freedom to explore ideas that might not otherwise be explored, but there's less opportunity for individual guidance. And in many times in those laboratories, that one needs to seek out others in the laboratory. It may be other postdoctoral fellows, the lab manager, or even some other graduate students to be able to help you along the way. And feel free, to engage in that conversation and ask for that help. Again, if you've had a more hands-off mentor, that transition to independence is often easier for many individuals. So just be able to weigh that and know what the style is, and it becomes apparent by talking to people with that have worked with that mentor to be able to understand kind of the dynamics of what is going on. In my experience, the very best mentors, and I was actually blessed to have a mentor during graduate school that fit in this category, it's to have somebody that's there when you need them, but not there when you don't need them. My mentor had a very wonderful knack for being able to do that. Not all mentors do that to the same degree. And again, there's much that one can work with to be able to have success in navigating that. And your mentors also, not only in training you in the conduct of research, can be extremely valuable in later stages. For example, in securing a good postdoctoral fellowship, being able to help you get that first faculty appointment, to help you in the writing and publishing of your first paper, and also in success in securing grants. And sometimes, it's the reputation of that mentor that really carries a lot of weight within a particular field. Now, in addition to mentoring style, as I mentioned, the size of the laboratory can be very important. And in our institution here, we have labs that are very small, that can be the principal investigator who serves as your mentor, and maybe only one or two other people, to very, very large and collaborative laboratories where there are dozens of people that are working together. And they run across the spectrum as far as complexity and differences in that area. So, and you can know this pretty much ahead of time, where your institution, what are the typical types of laboratories? Are there shared equipment that people use? Are there joint meetings that people have on a regular basis? How are you going to be able to interact with them? Are you going to be able to have your own environment bench or desk that you're going to have to work with? How often are those conversations going to occur? And again, look to the senior technician in your research group, or a postdoctoral fellow, in addition to your mentor, that can provide you additional guidance along the way. And sometimes it's just as valuable, if not more valuable. So with that brief introduction, I want to now transition to really the specific areas of investigation that you may choose to pursue. And again, there's lots of opportunities that are available these days in various disciplines. Many people will choose a research project that's very well suited to their clinical focus. If you're going to specialize, for example, in pediatrics or my pediatric endocrinology or diabetes, and each time you think about that, the more narrow focus that you have in your clinical practice, it can actually set the stage for framing a research question. And many times that the reason for that is because the questions that you're going to ask are going to be related to the patients that you're seeing on a regular basis. There's this whole paradigm of bringing something from the bedside to the bench and investigating it very rigorously. And then the goal is always to bring that full circle back to the patient. And one of the beauties of being a physician scientist, as opposed to just a PhD scientist, is you have the opportunity to be able to make that connection, to bridge that clinical care to the work that's being done in the laboratory. And nothing can be more fulfilling in my own career when we've had success in actually making a difference in the patients that we serve. So now some people will choose a particular laboratory with a particular project in mind. So you'll come into the program knowing the area that you want to work in, knowing the mentor who's going to be best suited to that, and really just want an environment to be able to conduct that research. I find that that's more rare. I think more often one has a general sense of an area that one is interested in, but many opportunities to branch out in different areas of that field of investigation. And at the very onset, there are many things to consider and many choices to make. And many students I know struggle over this unnecessarily. And I would say that there is more than one right choice. There are many things that you would be successful with. It's not exclusive to one particular area. And just recognize that, again, to give you more freedom in choosing that. Some of it, your choice is going to be influenced by what resources you have available. You can't choose a research project where you don't have expertise that's available to you in that investigation, or you don't have the technical tools available to be able to get you where you need to be. So there are some limits to that, and that is influenced by where you choose to train, and certainly by your mentor as well. Now, part of the research training is not limited to your primary mentor as well. So in graduate school, one normally gets a thesis committee, and you get experts in related but distinct areas of expertise. And they're not there to be a judge to you. They're actually there to be a support for you, and they can provide valuable resources to you, unique perspectives to be able to really think differently than your laboratory or your mentor may. Now, in some of the clinical specialties, when you go through fellowship and in training, you have that same benefit of a thesis committee and again, what we call scholastic oversight committees. So you get a group of individuals together that can help advise you, and how frequently you meet and how involved they are is going to be very dependent upon the people that you choose in the particular project that you're engaged in. But they're an incredibly valuable resource, and they provide another layer of support for you as you're embarking upon the establishment of your research program. So that now, the other aspect of this, of choosing a project in a particular area that I want to share with you is the question of where you want to be. There are several types of research, what I call the groundbreaking, high risk, high reward research projects, and they're very exhilarating. They're very exciting. These are things going to change that are going to change the paradigm of how we practice medicine. And many times those types of projects are appealing, but they carry risk that by being groundbreaking, there's also a chance, really, if you're truly doing this well, of not being able to publish or not validating your hypothesis. And the greater you're thinking outside the box, the more likely that is. And so there are other types of projects that I would say that are lower risk, but can have great benefit. And just because they're not earth-shattering or they're not going to make the headlines of the news does not mean that they're not important. And they can make a huge difference for even if it's a smaller population of individuals that are affected, or it can be the building blocks to those later breakthrough discoveries. Many of the things that are being discovered now are based upon other discoveries that were made decades in the past. And so you have to know that and really have that perspective that you can make a very, very important and meaningful contribution with a lower risk project. And again, it depends on the time you have available, the resources you have available, and you may have to choose a very focused question. But you always want to think about this in terms of how you're going to be in your own way to be able to contribute to that scientific enterprise. And I think that this risk reward, high risk, low risk is more critical at the earlier stages of your career. Once you're established, I think there's often more freedom to think more on the high risk projects because you've built that foundation. So take the advice of your mentor and your other colleagues in doing that. And one way that people do this often when they're starting off is they will think big, but always have a fallback project that they may turn to in the event that they're not making progress in the time that you have available to be able to have success at that stage of your training and establishing your career. And then because ultimately you want to be seen as a leader in your field. That is one of the criteria of how you can generate resources to be able to carry on your research and build that research career, to have people be coming to you because you know more than anyone else in the world about your area. It can be a narrow area, but it needs to be an expert in that. And that's really, as we go through career development, really some of the criteria that rightly is put in place for that. So striking your stake in the ground, as they often say, early is of tremendous benefit. My own experience really arose fortuitously in the early stages of my career. It actually stems to when I was in my clinical postdoctoral fellowship in pediatric endocrinology, and I was working in a basic science research laboratory studying the structure and function of a protein involved in transporting glucose across membranes. And I was having a conversation with a highly talented graduate student that was in the laboratory. And in the conversation, this was really just an informal conversation, we considered really a bold new hypothesis, and it regarded some of the side effects of HIV treatments used to treat AIDS at that time, which was a lethal disease. And it had been noticed that people were developing insulin resistance and diabetes while taking these medications. And really the entire field up to that point in time had really been considering long-term effects of these medications, and hadn't really even considered, based upon our expertise, that there might be a direct effect in the protein that we were studying for other reasons. And so the beauty of that was that we had a very, very straightforward and easily testable hypothesis, but it had been completely overlooked by others in the field. And when the initial results came in, we immediately knew that we had struck gold. The effects were so crystal clear and reproducible that it made a huge difference in the way the field had been approaching that problem. It took over a decade later of working out the ramifications of that discovery and investigating the molecular mechanism for the effect that we observed, to be able to lead to the development of new drugs that were better than the ones that had been on the market, leading to these toxicities. And that was a tremendous success. So we took a clinical observation that we saw patients getting insulin resistance and diabetes. We were able to ask the question and map out at a molecular level why this was occurring, and then develop new drugs that would not have that. Of what's out there. So now I want to say a little bit really about the generation of your research hypothesis, being able to focus that question once you've chosen a field. And you want to do this together with your mentor, your scholastic oversight committee, or your other colleagues in a lot of discussions. Okay, looks like I lost her for a minute. Are we back? Did you catch everything up to that last minute?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We did.
Okay, all right. I just noticed you dropped off there. All right. So I was just beginning to talk about the development of your hypothesis in your particular area of research. One of the things that I would say is really, as you begin to delve more into your particular area, the question that you want to address is to know what I would say is your competition. Who are the other investigators in the area, and what are they asking with their questions? And by competition, I don't mean enemies. The way science is conducted, this is a very healthy and good enterprise of being able to have people with competing ideas and in goals. And it often adds a dimension to the investigation that can propel and accelerate the discoveries. In that, you need to recognize where the prevailing biases are. And all scientists come with preconceived ideas, and you need to be able to think outside the box. Don't accept necessarily things that are being put forward as being absolutely, the truth. You need to read, know the primary literature, and not just read the papers, but read them critically. It's one of the ways that you can get very important ideas. You can get new hypotheses that you can develop by doing that critical reading of the literature. And many times in the training process, you'll be trained in how to do that critically through the process we call journal clubs, and in other ways as well. Again, within the hypothesis generation, that even when you're applying for grants, you need to understand what are the underlying scientific premises, the things that you're not going to be studying, but are taken as fact as the basis for which to form your hypothesis. And then really think about what hypotheses that you can generate that really are innovative, that may potentially change the field. And again, that's a criteria that our National Institute of Health looks to as far as the innovation and whether it is really making a difference in that. Much more that I could say about that, but I'll leave that for now as far as developing that initial project. But once you've established, where you're going to do your research, you've found your mentor, you've recruited a whole team of colleagues in your thesis committee, scholastic oversight committee, or even your colleagues that you're training with that can provide advice and guidance. And I would say, just to add to that, you want to find people that aren't directly in your field. They want to have, many times you can get ideas from people that are very, very good scientists. But are in different areas, because they often have a perspective that you may not have thought about when you're too close to the work that you're doing. Now, once you've already established what you're going to do, then you need to roll up your sleeves and actually do the work, right? And that's easier said than done, especially if you're in a clinical, training or a clinical field where you're going to have competing clinical responsibilities. If you're lucky enough to have a dedicated research time where that's all you're doing, you're in a much better place. But the reality is not all of us have that ability. And I would say that the advice I give to our fellows all the time is to maintain focus and try to avoid distractions as best as possible. And the best analogy I can give in these, at least in the early stages of your training, is to be a miner rather than a prospector. What do I mean by that? You want to take a narrower focus and dig deep to learn all you can about that, rather than succumbing to the temptation to dilute your effort by too many side projects or trying to help other people out in areas that are not directly related to your research. So you want to establish yourself in your narrow focus so that you can get that first publication, establish your credibility in that area. Later in your career, you're going to be able to maybe branch out into other areas. This happens naturally when people come to you as the expert to help them with their particular problem, and you can get many contributions to other projects, but try to stay very, very focused. You need to set realistic but a motivational timeline for the completion of your studies. And so by that, time goes by extremely fast when you're in the early stages of training, and it will have repercussions for you as you're seeking faculty appointments and advancement along in academia, that you have to be focused on things getting done. So, for example, one of the mistakes that people often make is that they want to have everything perfectly complete, every a T crossed and I dotted before they'll submit a paper for publication, and that's not very realistic. You need to have enough work done to make a complete story, but there's certainly always more work to be done. The most successful projects that I've ever been involved with, when one completes the research in that project, you've left projects for a half a dozen other people. That's really a sign of success. I would encourage you in working in the environment, whether it's a clinical research group or in a basic science research lab, to really strive to maintain good working relationships with the other students, the postdoctoral fellows, and the faculty that are around. They are your best asset. You want to be a good laboratory citizen. You want to be able to help them as best you can, because you'll be drawing on them for help as well. There's several formal types of resources that one can look to, to help in establishing, kind of the basics, the nuts and bolts. One that I found very helpful is there's an author by the name of Kathy Barker, and she writes a book, At the Bench, and it's very readily available. You can get an electronic form of that on the web. And provides very practical advice, and much of what I'm sharing with you is included in that book. And when I first read that book, I will confess that I made many of the mistakes that this author had warned against. If I had read the book prior to that time, I perhaps wouldn't have made all of those mistakes. And then when you're establishing a career, there's a follow-up book called At the Helm, which kind of helps you in setting up that faculty appointment and research career. The other thing that I would strongly encourage you is if you really want to make a difference in research, there are so many different opportunities that you have in academia to make contributions in other areas, serving on various committees and social functions, and they're very tempting, to commit yourself to. Be very careful in that if there is a superfluous commitment that really doesn't further your goal, you want to think think very, very carefully and discerning about whether or not to say yes to that. I would also encourage you that when you're going through your research and engaged in that, that you begin drafting your manuscripts very early, even before the data is fully obtained. That helps you to focus where the remaining questions are in the story that you're trying to tell. You may change your entire abstract and conclusions, but there are many parts of that paper that you can certainly write early, including the introduction that led you to engage in that research. And so, and then, really it is refined over time, and papers generally get better and better the more they're worked on. Now, certainly if you're engaging in this research in the formal MSTP program and MD PhD program, you've got a wider time frame. Most of you, I would guess, are going to be engaged in this during your fellowship training, and there's a much shorter time frame that requires greater focus on being able to engage in this research. Sometimes as short as 2 years or even less. So I think you have to make a decision relatively early. Distinguish between whether you want to engage in basic science, clinical research, or what is known as translational research, where you're taking those basic discoveries and trying to apply them to the clinic. And even in the area of translational research, there are many different stages of that, from early application of basic science data all the way up of critically evaluating data within the clinic itself. Now, to be successful in all of this, one is going to need to have money. And so you need to be trained and learn about getting grant support to provide for that project. Now, the good news is that in the early stages of your training, there are many funding opportunities that are not going to be available to you when you get further along in your career. And you're going to have the help of your mentor and your colleagues and your thesis committee, or whatever the group of helpers that you have established, to be able to allow you to learn what we call grantsmanship. You can have a great idea. So, it's often been said, and I think it's very true, there is no way to make a bad idea look good, but there's about 1,000 ways to make an excellent idea look not as good as it could in the writing of that grant. And so learning all of the skills of being able to present yourself and communicating the research that you're proposing and why it needs to be done is a skill that you need to spend quite a bit of time. You need to understand the review process as well. So one of the things about science is it's inherently critical, and there's a very valuable process of peer review, whether it's through a manuscript, in your defending your thesis, or in getting a grant support. And again, the science gets better through that process. You have to develop a very thick skin to be able to acknowledge when you submit something for publication and it gets completely torn apart by your reviewers. This is not a bad thing. That you often then revise your manuscript, address the weak points, and it ends up being a better paper. And so the better you get at that, every single physician scientist has encountered failures and has learned from those failures to be able to be successful. Publishing is essential to be able to be successful in academia if you want to continue to do research beyond just a simple project in the summer. And much of the evaluation process and the proof of your success is going to be based upon your grant support that you receive, and then the papers that come from that grant support. They feed on each other. So you need publications to get grants. You need grants to get publications. And so again, it's very challenging at the very onset, but as things move forward, it gets easier and easier, both because you've gotten better at the process, you understand how to write those papers and grants, and then you're able to better apply that as you move forward. So, and the last thing that I'm going to share with you is just recognizing in academia that there are various academic pathways at various schools and different criteria for judging your advancement in that field. There are clinical tracks and investigator tracks or research tracks, and you need to know what the criteria are for promotion and for advancing in your career. And it's not just to pat yourself on the back, it's an important part of the process of establishing and promoting your research and moving your program forward. On research tracks, again, research and grants or papers and grants are going to be critical in advancing. In clinical pathways, you can often draw upon your clinical experience, your teaching of other people. But with that, just general roadmap, I hope I provided you with at least enough detail and enough of my own experience to be able to help you be successful in this area. I have to say that it is one of the most rewarding careers I think that exists. Never a dull moment. Every time, every day is new. Really, in all of this, really recognize that you have a giftedness. You've already made it to medical school and beyond. For many of you, you're highly talented. You're bright. You're dedicated. If you choose a career in research and you find the right support and you have the right game plan in place to ensure success, I think that it will be an incredible opportunity for you. Have fun. This should be fun. It's an incredibly fun to be a physician scientist, and I want to encourage all of you, to strongly consider this, and many of you already are. With that introduction and the time that I've been able to share with you, I'm going to stop here and hopefully be able to take any questions that you might have. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We appreciate that. So before we go to the questions, which is the next thing on the agenda, let's quickly take the announcements quickly, then we'll go into the questions. If that's okay with you, sir?
Absolutely.
So over to you, Favor.
Okay, so I'll choose of them in a place where she'll be able to take the announcement. I'm sure many of us were around yesterday, and it's your day too. Honestly, it's a big congratulations to you. Thank you for actually having a double dose. And if it's your first time in this 2-day conference, we appreciate you as well. I'm sure you've had a mouthful of experience. Now, the CMDA, Christian Medical and Dental Association, Caribbean region, which is under the Southern region. So we have about 11 several states and chapters that falls under the Southern region. If you were around yesterday, you would have heard our regional director. He spoke yesterday on leading with purpose. That's Mr. Grant Hewitt. So he's our regional director, and I am the student representative for CMDA Caribbean. We have several chapters in the Caribbean, and my role or my assignment basically is to see to it that every chapter of CMDA in the Caribbean medical schools are strengthened. And in those schools where we don't have CMDA at the moment, we seek for the establishment of CMDA in those places. And of course, there are several medical schools that have Christian groups that have similar vision like CMDA. We wouldn't go there to establish another, kind of Christian association or something, but we basically align with such established Christian groups to see how together with the power of synergy we can achieve more. So that's our mission, that's our goal. And yeah, starting out with organizing conferences. This is the very first dual kind of conference we've had. We had the last conference, which was in March, was just one Caribbean medical conference, which we just spoke about the AI. We had two speakers, spoke about AI, technology, medicine, where do you stand? But in this one now, which is the first, where we're having the leadership conference and the research conference, and it's a pattern that we are establishing. So we're going to be having a leadership conference every semester, that's for the region, and we're going to be having another conference. So it could be research, could be relationship, could be on technology, health tech, could be on something else. But leadership development for healthcare workers, for medical doctors, for medical students is very important, and it's part of our vision. Every semester we're going to be having one of such. So look out for this next next semester, you're going to see the flyers, you're going to get the emails. If you are not yet a CMDA member, you can go online, www.cmda.org, see the form right there, fill it, and you become a member of CMDA Global now. So you get emails, you get notifications, and we have our application, the student app, on your Apple Store, also on your Google Play Store. You can download it. It's a mouthful. Devotionals, webinars, videos, newsletter, a lot of things. So I encourage every single person to download the CMDA student app, student life app, and you are going to gain a lot from that. Now, if you have questions, you're going to have the opportunity to ask your questions directly. If you've sent in your questions and you want to ask directly, that's fine. But if you've sent the questions that will be read are the ones that were sent in your registration. For everyone who would ask your questions, you can turn on your video, that's fine. If not a problem at all. So that's pretty much it. I want to encourage you, follow CMDA Caribbean on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Follow Dr. Paul HRUZ on this platform as well. That's the issue. Most researchers are busy they are busy in the lab and they don't have time for social events and they don't have time to socialize. I believe things are changing anyway, but that's the reality. So, but follow him. I believe he will share his LinkedIn account name. Basically, it's on Facebook, on Instagram. You can share it with us, so you can follow him and you can send him emails, ask questions, talk about mentorship. You can benefit from such relationship, and that's one of our dreams, that we can connect. We can create a network of medical students becoming new doctors and persons who will serve as mentors, such that we are trading a path that has been lit already, that we have light, we have illumination. So from there, we can now establish, novel paths, if that's what God wants for us. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sure you have questions ready. Let me not take any time further. Let's ask a question. Over to you, MC.
Thank you, Rosalas. We appreciate you. Before the question, we just want to say we want to recognize Dr. Esther Ifremonde in our midst. She's the faculty advisor for CMDA Dominica. So in the comment section, let us put our hands together. Let's appreciate Dr. Esther for being among us today. And thank you so much, Dr. Esther. She's our faculty advisor. She has been there all while CMD Dominica has been. She has been there helping us in whatever way she can. So moving on to the question. We have some people who already sent their questions in earlier on. So I'm just going to be reading the questions out before we entertain those who would like to unmute and ask their questions. So the first question is, how can medical students, especially those in the Caribbean, set up effective research groups in a school that doesn't make provision for research studies? So let me take that again. How can medical students, especially those in the Caribbean, set up effective research groups in a school that doesn't make provision for research studies?
It's an excellent question. How do you engage in research? I presented in many respects, in an ideal environment where you have many choices and you have a rich network. And I do recognize that many, are in environments where the opportunities are limited. I think you have to be realistic. The first thing is to be able to network together. I heard that just a few minutes ago, but to be able to associate you with people that have the same interest and are asking questions like that about how you can engage in research, and then maybe you need to narrow down the types of questions that you might be able to address. And it involves not only if you don't have an infrastructure for a question that would require a substantial amount of cost and resources and time, then you need to think about areas that you might be able to contribute and questions that are perhaps more focused in an area that won't require tremendous resources. And by resources, I mean not only dollars, money, but also time, because time is a precious commodity, particularly as a medical student. And many people will choose types of research to get started in that may be more of a clinical review or a chart review, or being able to delve into the research literature in a way that there's lots of opportunities in bioinformatics now, where you can mine the databases and be able to do research, really what we call in silico. And that can be done, you don't want to set up a research question that requires a time-intensive experiment that goes over many, many weeks when you have no idea what your responsibilities are going to be. And I think you had touched on this as well, so that even if you don't have a strong or you have a limited number of time and resources to identify those as faculty that can be of support to you in doing that. So I would just say be realistic. You can be just as inquisitive, and you can actually, do very, very good quality research in a very narrow area that with limited resources. And we've had many medical students that have engaged in that type of research, even when they have a month elective. We have opportunities where you can block out a month of time, or you have some rotations in your clinical years that are less time intensive than others, where you have some downtime to be able to engage in that. And if you have a network, clubs or however you have this, one area that many people will do is they will establish what's called a journal club. And just because you have a desire to learn about research, have each member in that group select a key paper and present the paper, and then discuss ideas related to that. What are the gaps in knowledge? Is there anything that one can contribute related to that? And many times this is aided if you can have a faculty member to serve as kind of a overseeing that type of a group. Again, it doesn't have to be very formal, and it can be a wonderful, both exhilarating scientific experience, but also a social experience as well. Do it over some food and some cool drinks, and just really be able to enjoy that fellowship. Many ideas, I can tell you by my own experience, have come out of those types of conversations. Just getting people together that are inquisitive, that are just looking at what's in front of them, and ideas will come. They don't come immediately, they don't come all the time, but that would be the advice, and be able to tailor your ability to be able to to engage in that meaningful research.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. That was very, very clear. I really love that. It makes it very, very feasible for students to do it, get together, get your friends together, those who are sensitive with okay, so now when it says, how do I get involved or prepare for the field of research? And what are the skills necessary, or what courses would I need to acquire? Should I take that again?
Yes, I think you broke up a little bit. So yeah, just why don't you
How do I get involved or prepare for the field of research? What are the skills necessary, or what courses?
Okay, so how to get involved in research, and what are the necessary skills? I would say that the basic skills all of you already possess, and that's being curious, and really you're already being trained in the area of medicine to be able to think critically, to be able to be inquisitive, and to be able to, you're a good observer. Anytime that once you're in medical school, whether you're in the earlier years just studying the basic sciences, every patient encounter, you are actually acting like a scientist. You are using your eyes, you're using your hands, you're using your knowledge to be able to identify what is going on, and you're questioning all the time. So I think you have that. Now the question really to translate that fundamental skill, there's a lot of refining that needs to be done to be a better scientist, and to be able to know the specific, so that everything that I outlined in my talk, I think, can be applied, to answering that particular question, as far as setting up, the research question. But be curious, but also be critical. I think those are key. And I think as one continues to do that, you get better and better at that over time. And to be able to see that and develop that, again, within the networks, and taking the experience and training that you can get from those that you're surrounding yourself with. And again, you have to be able to do this within the context of what you have available to you. But I think all of you are curious, all of you can think critically, and you have a tremendous knowledge base already at this stage of your training, no matter what stage that's at. So.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll ask the next question. It says, is there a way to get your research ideas to someone who could help actualize them?
Yes, so getting attention, and I think this is actually key. So, and this has actually been improved over the last several years. When I started training, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet even available in ways that people can communicate. And there's many ways that people now communicate and getting ideas out that wasn't even available, to me when I was in training at your stage right now. There are certainly just the same thing, like we have Facebook and we have social networking. There are many things, like ResearchGate is one that's available, and there's Doximity, and there's all sorts of tools that are available to get connected with other people. There are chat groups within each domain. My Pediatric Endocrine Society has a listserv where people will present questions or ideas, and this is populated by dozens upon dozens of people, and the feedback one gets can be quite helpful. So I think that it's really one of the advantages. Not only do we have all of these new research tools available, we also have the social networking abilities to be able to transmit ideas. One of the things that people, so the early stage is just tossing out ideas and getting feedback. Now, when you get further on in the research, that you're going to keep that group and make it more selective so that you can complete your research, before that there's others that publish ahead of you. But really, the more collaborative, and people do recognize this in science. There used to be a time when physicians could act independently in solo practice, and that occurs, but less frequently now. It's the same thing in the research environment. Science has become highly collaborative, and so the more that scientists are networking, and the other thing I would encourage you, don't be shy about content. If you read a paper and you have a question about the work that is done in that paper, most of the time there's going to be contact information for the lead author, and the authors themselves will respond to your questions. They're just like every single one of you. Don't be intimidated by that. Feel free to ask questions. Maybe not 100%, but you'll be surprised at how many times. And when you identify yourself as a student, many of us, go out of our way to be able to respond to those types of questions, because we see that as being very valuable, but it's actually quite helpful to the investigators themselves. You never know exactly who's reading your work and whether it's having an impact. And so, contact people. Feel free to reach out to them and ask questions as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'm getting more questions. Well, I just want to encourage us, just like Dr. Paul said, just ask your questions. Don't be shy, don't be scared. Let's use this as a practice to ask the questions, to be in that research mode. So if you have questions, please unmute your mic and ask a question. And if you even want to go further, go ahead and put on your camera and ask a question. Please, let's do that fast. Anyone wants to ask a question? Before I read what I have here, but please, if you have a question, if you can ask, please unmute your mic. Anybody? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and read the question I have here. I guess they're not ready to ask. So they're sending questions anyway, but they're not ready to unmute the mic and ask. Okay, so the person says, what are the easiest and less time and money consuming types of researches a medical student can write or get involved in?
Yeah, so the question is about, what is feasible, the types of research that have the time commitment and the resource commitment that is something that one can engage in during medical school. Certainly, many people will. I mean, one of the easiest things to do is just, and this helps to focus your question as well, is a literature review. So you can be able to look at what has been published in a particular question. It doesn't take much really, other than accessing journals, and depending on your library, sometimes you can't get all of the papers depending on where you're at. But there's a lot that's accessible electronically or in your library to be able to do that research. It's much easier to do that now than it was in the past. The other type of study that with a mentor to have a very focused question is a retrospective chart review that can be done very easily as well. So there are some bars that have to be met as far as there's usually a committee that will review the research proposal to be able to protect information for confidentiality. You have to be very clear, but part of that process of getting approval to have access to the clinical data actually helps you refine your question. It helps you to do the science better. So I think that type of research can be done. Sometimes, there are projects that are going on by other faculty members where there's a portion of that project where they may be able to hand off to you to be able to complete, a very simple study. And again, maybe it would be just reviewing data or in a very simple way. Those are probably the easiest types of retrospective reviews, or case reports is another area, so that it's probably one of the lower tiers of quality of evidence, but it's indispensable. So many times case reports, a very interesting case that you encounter in your normal experiences can be written up in a way that allows, so what case reports do are allow others to be able to ask hypotheses and design studies, to be able to get answers. And so if it's a condition or the association of various conditions together may provide a key pivotal piece of information that somebody else will take to move forward. And again, that's just a matter of time of putting together what you've seen in your patient. You have to do a little bit of research to try to put it in perspective of what is already known about the condition, maybe ask some hypotheses about what might be responsible for what you've seen. And that's very easy to do. And that can be done in your spare time with the tools that you have. And it doesn't cost really more than anything other than the stamp to put on the publication when you send it off. So.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So I have just 2 questions left. So this is the second to the last question. It says, I'm a recent medical student graduate, yet to start residency, currently on operations manager in an internal medicine practice. What kind of research do you think I can pursue that would be most beneficial to me at this level?
Well, my own experience, and I will say this is a bias. I mentioned it in my presentation that there are various stages of medical. You probably have more time in medical school than you're going to have in residency to do research. There are so many responsibilities that you have during residency, and there's barely enough time to complete your clinical responsibilities. You can continue to be involved in things like journal clubs or discussions with people. It's often challenging to get more than that done during that phase of your training. It's not typically designed to have that protected time for research. If you're coming at, you already have a background in research and you've already done work and you're going to analyze data, you might be able to find a month or a couple of weeks that you could use to mine through that data. But if you're getting started from scratch, and it's going to be very challenging. And I would really encourage you to focus on that clinical training. That's what residency training is for. Once you finish your residency, then there are a number of different avenues that you can pursue to be able to engage in that research. And it depends on what opportunities are there for you and what your commitment is and what your desire is. Most people here in the United States that are interested in getting involved in research, whether they've been involved prior to that time or not, during their clinical fellowship is where they have time to engage. my own specialty in pediatric endocrinology. It's a 3-year specialty training program. And really, it's about 1 year of clinical training and about 2 years of research. That's built into the program. There are other internal medicine subspecialties where they have 2 different tracks. You can enter into a research track or a clinical track. And you have actually the research track is a little bit longer because you need that extra time to be able to develop your research project. But that is actually well suited to that because it's part of the formal training and you're going to get protected time to be able to do that. So I would say that during residency, look at your residency training as the optimal time to become an expert in the clinical practice of your specialty. You can keep an eye out for how the field is moving forward in that time. What are questions that need to be addressed? Maybe be involved. Going to research talks, if you have them now, there's many of them that are available electronically through the same forum like we're meeting this evening. So you don't have to travel and it's easy to be participate in learning about the research. And that's what I would spend most of the time I would suggest during residency training. It's very rare to be able to do more than that during residency.
Thank you, sir. So I'm still getting more questions. Okay, so this question says, in writing a literature review, what areas of the articles should you always read to extract information from?
So how do you critically read the literature and being able to do that? Well, let me just give you a couple. So we could have a whole hour-long talk on that as far as how to and maybe even longer than that. I'll say this, so that what many people, so you're really pressed for time, and what many students will do is you'll read the title of a paper that'll is this something that you want to read, then you'll read the abstract, and then most people will jump to the conclusion, the last paragraph of the paper, and then put the paper down. Okay, that's how most people look through that. Or you'll go to one of these Reader Digest sources, like we have something called Up to Date, which does all the summarizing for you. That is not what I suggest that you do. Okay, so that's the starting point, but then you need to be able to, you can read through the entire paper from beginning to finish, and then focus on learning the skills of looking at the actual data. Learning about how research trials are done. So not every single paper is written with the same amount of rigor. There are different trial designs, there are study methodology, or if it's a basic science paper, criteria that's used in that particular field, and reliability, for the data. Get a good training in statistics. There's much that there was a study done actually by the journal, I think it was JAMA, about 15 years ago, and I think it holds true today as well, where they looked through published papers that went through peer review and the number of papers that used the wrong statistical methods and got wrong conclusions because of how they did the analysis. It's very, very prevalent. So be able to understand, how to critically evaluate the data. Was it the right research method to address the question that one wanted to address? What are the underlying biases that are present? Every paper has some bias. Were they able to overcome those biases? Is the data itself able to answer the questions? So, is there a proper control group? Is it there's always in papers, data that you can extract for that. And the more you do this, it gets easier and easier. The first time you do it, you can probably spend, hours upon hours, going through that, and then having somebody else, point out things that you might have missed as well, I think are very important. You want to read, widely if you're doing a review. So what most people will do is will try to find, and nowadays, since there's been such an explosion of publications, it's sometimes very difficult to read the entire field. So you have to narrow your question, just like when you're writing a paper when you were in college, right? So you'd always say, what are you writing about? Is it too broad that you can't get deep enough into it? So make sure you refine your question for the literature review with a reasonable number of papers, and then select those papers that are most relevant to the question and that are of the highest quality, and focus most of your effort in that area. So there's much more that I could say about critically evaluating papers. The first advice is to read the entire paper, to always read everything with a critical eye. It may be true, but science is always, that's the way science works. So we're always, I'll use an example, okay? When we state a hypothesis, you probably learned this, back in high school. The way that hypotheses are actually phrased properly is to establish what the null hypothesis is, meaning that you assume that there's no difference between your control group and your intervention group. And then what you do in science is you try to find the evidence to disprove that null hypothesis. Okay, so you start with with skepticism, with the presumption that there is no difference, and then you look for the evidence to overcome that. Now, unfortunately, the way science is being conducted more frequently is people will begin with a conclusion, and then they only look at the data that supports their conclusion, and they miss many facts. They make erroneous conclusions, and it's very detrimental to the scientific process. And you can actually pick that out in reading papers. You can actually see do they state a very clear hypothesis? Have they generated the design of the experiment to be able to answer, the question adequately? There's a whole area of power. Have you recruited enough study subjects that then there are questions about, is something statistically significant versus clinically significant? You may something from a numerical standpoint, there's a difference in groups, but it has no bearing upon how you're going to practice medicine. Again, we could go on and on for a long time, and maybe we can do this at a later date. But that's how I would begin. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And there are many resources available. There's actually review articles about how to critically review papers. There's a whole series of articles in some of the major journals to map out for you the different types of studies that are done. What are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of those studies? So just leave you with that.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I have one more question, and I think that will be it for today. But if you have any question again, please, you can unmute to ask your question. So I'm just going to put on the last question. Okay, it says, what advice would you give someone dealing with a demanding or overbearing mentor who is an authority in his field, but character-wise may be deficient?
So I imagine the question is, once you've chosen a mentor and then you find out later that they have a mentoring style that doesn't match with what your needs are.
I'm sorry, not the style, but more of his character. So like he's good in his field, but his attitude, his character is just overbearing. It's too much.
Yes. And again, the overbearingness will translate into how they interact. And there's many different variations of that that I find. Many times what I find is that the more junior investigators are less secure and more likely to fit that mold as far as being overbearing. And that's because they still feel threatened in establishing their career and they want to have control over everything. It usually comes with experience to be able to back off a little bit. Some it's just a personality issue. Hopefully, one will be able to ascertain that personality and that characteristic before signing on for the mentorship. And the way you do that is you ask others that have interacted with that individual. And you can ask very pointed questions, about the interactions, and usually you get a pretty clear answer about that. Now, the question is if you sign on and you make that decision to work with that individual and you find it to be not very helpful. I would say for the most part, there is an inequality at this stage of training from the mentor's position and where you are as a student. And it's the ability to quickly change that may or may not occur. Sometimes the individual is not aware of that overbearing nature. And there may be ways that you can bring that to light and establish parameters of what is helpful or not. Some mentors actually do adapt their interactions based upon those how these conversations are occurring. Some it's just a personality trait that they're not going to be able to change. I have had situations where people have and I have very vivid examples where some of my students, when I was a fellowship program director, had chosen mentors that really fit that mold as well. And at some point, sometimes there's a need to back off and choose a different mentor. That certainly does happen. It's very challenging, but you want to, and then you need to navigate how to do that gracefully and be able to do this in a positive way, because you don't want to burn bridges. You want to maintain that contact. I would say that the other thing is you're going to encounter this in all different settings, not just in the research setting as well. But the overbearing individual, I think it helps to understand where that's coming from. So if you can see the insecurity, you can see the doubts, or you can see the reason why they're behaving in that way. There's sometimes you can get other people in the research group to kind of deflect that, that you can not work as directly with that individual. Again, it's a variety of situations. Each one has to be dealt with uniquely, but it is a real phenomenon. Just by the very nature that the question was asked, I think it is a reality. And it really, there are so many different interactions that develop in that arena.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Does anyone have any more questions?
Yes, so
Okay, so
it's a request, and I want to request on behalf of a number of my colleagues here, if you will grant us the opportunity to be mentored, as many that would reach out to organize that, be mentored by you in the area of the various research. It may not directly be what you have been involved in. I know you are really more into the pediatric endocrinology aspect, but then and diabetes and all. But if you don't mind, for me, for example, I have strong interest in mental health and psychiatry, and there's so many ideas on my mind. But then I really need that discussion. And I suspect and I believe I have several persons as well who are good enough in the digital world. So we can always have that opportunity. Is it fine with you, sir?
Yes, and I think you'll find that there are lots of people that really take a lot of interest in being able to do that. To be able to help. It's one of actually, as you get further along in one's career, this becomes more and more important. That you see that the future of medicine, the future of science is dependent upon being able to train you to be the best possible physician scientist that you can. That's the hope for the future. So yes, and I'd also say that for most of us, these requests are not a burden at all. It's actually a joy. You're again, I encourage you to reach out and contact people. If you convince yourselves that they're too busy to interact with you, or they're not interested, you're going to find that that's not true most of the time.
okay, thank you so much, sir. So let's go ahead and appreciate Dr. Paul for the opportunity, for accepting to be contacted, to be gotten through, and to help us. So I'm just going to summarize some of the things I learned quickly, and I believe that we've also learned just to remind us. Your network matters when you want to enter research. The right mentors, the right mentor matters. So like now we've gotten this opportunity with Dr. Paul Rose, and we are so glad about it. Another thing I got is that you have to look for the right environment, the right mentor, the right environment. Find where your strength lies and where you can do well. Also, look to your senior technicians that can provide you more information, but that mentorship is key. Like the right mentors, the right mentor really matters. Be able to think outside the box, find people that are not directly in your group, sometimes just go outside the box. And funny thing is that we learned this also yesterday in the leadership training, that it's important sometimes to go out of your area. For instance, you're a sanguine or a choleric, to just keep moving with fellow sanguines or fellow cholerics. Get to know who the melancholics are, how do they think, how do they reason. You could from there realize, okay, I think I can go this way. Well, I think this is a very important thing to add to my research. Once you've established what you want to do, roll up your sleeve and get to work. Like once you establish this what you want to do, don't just sit back, relax, and be like, okay, I'll try it tomorrow, next week. or when I'm done. Like it said, even when you're in your clinical rotations, and there's sometimes we are just less busy. There are some rotations that are not so demanding. So you have opportunity to do other things. So just roll up your sleeve and get to work. Also maintain focus. Take the narrow focus. Don't try to do so many things at the same time. Just focus on one thing and try to achieve that thing. Establish your credibility. And to be successful, of course, we need money, we need grants, but that's not the base. You can start where you are even without accessing those big grants, right? And also you can start a journal club. In our school, we might not really have like the big opportunity, but you can start a journal club. Get your fellow students who are inquisitive, who are interested, get a faculty member. We have Dr. Esther among us, who is a faculty advisor for CMDA Dominica. I'm sure she might be interested in helping out. And also we have the privilege to reach out to Dr. Paul. So that's all I have to say today. I just want to say a big thank you on behalf of everyone here today. Thank you so much for granting us. This is a big privilege. We appreciate it. We do not take for granted. So in the comments, I keep saying comment section. In the chat, let's just say thank you to Dr. Paul once more. Let's say thank you. Go ahead and just say thank you to him. Yeah, I can see they're saying thank you to you. Okay, so to wrap it up, we're just going to pray to God to thank him for today, because not by power, not by mind, and to thank him that we'll be able to implement everything we've learned today. So is anybody volunteering to lead us in the closing prayer?
Okay. I volunteer. Father, we thank you for this evening. We appreciate you because you are a faithful God. We thank you for the awesome opportunity and privilege to learn, to understand. There are some persons right now who have nervous breakdown. They cannot learn. They can't understand. It's a medical condition. It's a complication of a problem, of a disease process. But that's not our case. Some is age. We have dementia. That's not our case. We appreciate you because of the privilege you've given to us to learn, to understand, and to be part of the solution to the problems in our world. We give you thanks and praises, Lord. We thank you for Dr. Paul, who is taking ahead of us to learn, to understand, and to teach us. We appreciate you for the opportunity he has, the time he has to communicate his knowledge. We are so grateful. Thank you for every single person in this place. There would have been one reason or the other not to have made it, but here it is. They made it, even some since yesterday and some today. We thank you. We give all the thanks and praises. We thank you for CMDA Caribbean and CMDA across the globe. We thank you for the amazing things you are doing through this platform. We give you all the praise. Some persons here joined from Nigeria, some from the United States, some from several parts of the Caribbean. Thank you for all of these lives. Father, we ask and pray as we are being released into our world. We ask and pray that in come 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time, should you delay your coming, every one of us will be doing amazing things, providing solutions to problems in our world, in the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord, for answered prayer. To you be all the glory. For we have prayed in Jesus' name.
Amen. 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 Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
So
Can we all unmute and with one voice say thank you, Dr. Paul?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul.
We are so grateful.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. We do appreciate you. We do appreciate you. Imagine it's about 11 p.m. Actually, to 12 in West African time. And we have a good number from Nigeria. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'm aware some leaders from CMD Nigeria are with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead and shine the light. Who God has made it to be.
Don't forget to be a member of CMDA Caribbean and
That's
also
right.
Dominica, and also join the CMDA Worldwide by going to www.cmda.org. So we'll see you in our next conference. Thank you once again. From us to you, it is. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Can you please post the link to Dr. Paul's LinkedIn? Okay. Please the link to his.
We'll reach out to you. All right. And this recording, for those who are still on, this recording will be on our YouTube channel, CMDA Caribbean. So you can visit it and you will find the recording so that even if you came late, you can access the conference from the beginning. That of yesterday and that of today.
Hi, sorry, please. Where did you say it to be on?
Our YouTube page, CMDA
Okay.
Caribbean.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.